Chapter 21 Minuet of the Forest. The Chapel of the Goddesses in Ordon was one of the few buildings of its kind left in Hyrule. The worship of the goddesses had been banned soon after Ganondorf conquered Hyrule, and most of the chapels were put to the torch. The old triangular-shaped stone building saw few devotees enter its doors these days. All but one priestess, a healer, had fled when Ordon seemed certain to fall to the Gerudo king. Now, instead of the long mantras of those who worshipped the goddesses, the interior was filled with the moans and cries of those afflicted by wounds from Hyrule's long war. The healer was a Sheikah. She was tugging at a green shawl draped across her shoulders as she quietly examined a small form lying on a makeshift bed. Bandages now covered Firenze's entire torso. His eyes were shut and sunken. The healer's brow was creased with worry as she gently placed a hand on Firenze's forehead before grasping his wrist next. Link watched her, perched on a stool, waiting with growing trepidation. Sheik sat on a stool beside him, deep in thought as they waited for the healer's verdict. Firenze had only woken once when they brought him to the chapel, refusing to speak to anyone except Navi and repeating a name over and over again. Arden, Firenze's fairy. The boy had soon lapsed back into unconsciousness again, by which stage the healer had arrived. Rin, meanwhile, stood vigil beside the boy's sickbed. Deep in thought, she paid no attention to anyone around her.
"Firenze just keeps saying Arden,"
said Navi, quietly from Link's shoulder.
"Where is my Arden? Nothing else. I said we would find him, but Link, I'm not even sure if his fairy is alive."
Link looked away. It hurt too much. His friend was lying beside him, dying, his rattling breaths echoing in his head. Link wanted to help. He'd give his own life just to see his friend spared from this cruel fate. There was nothing he could do, chosen hero or not, and that hurt him more than anything. He clenched his fists, fingernails digging into his palms. He wanted to scream. He wanted to demand the Sheikah do more to save Firenze. He wanted to scream at the goddesses for abandoning them to this fate. Why? The Kokiri didn't deserve this. They hadn't done anything wrong. Can a Kokiri survive long without their fairy? Sheik asked, grabbing Link's attention. Navi stared silently at Firenze, looking pained at the boy's state.
"No,"
Navi said quietly.
"Nor can a fairy survive long if..."
Link was sure she was about to say, if something happened to their Kokiri, but Navi went stiff as she spoke. Navi had survived the death of her charge. He took that like a lifeline. Maybe it wasn't too late for Firenze. "You survived," he murmured. Navi shuffled in discomfort.
"Just,"
she said quietly,
"if Saria hadn't taken me to Morocco as quickly as she did..."
As her voice trailed off into silence, Link looked down at her sadly. Morocco, the great fairy of the forest, was even older than the great Deku Tree himself. She disappeared 7 years ago. At the time, nobody had thought twice about it. She frequently ventured off for short amounts of time to visit her distant kin. Her disappearance, Link realized, was too close to when the great Deku Tree was cursed to be a coincidence. "You never mentioned what happened to her," Link said, trying to distract Navi from the memory of her previous charge's death.
"She said she was going somewhere in the woods and expected to be back in a few weeks,"
said Navi.
"She never came back."
"Do you think Ganondorf did something to her?" Sheik asked.
"It looks like it,"
Navi said, looking back over at Firenze.
"If something had happened to Arden, then only one of the great fairies can heal Firenze."
"Then let us hope his fairy is still alive," Sheik said heavily. When the healer finished her examination of Firenze, her troubled expression did nothing to ease Link's worry. She stared for the longest time at the Kokiri lying on the floor beside her. Anger pulsed through Link as he stared at Firenze's pale form. Who could have brought the boy to this state? What kind of monsters were they, that they would whip him till his back was bloodied and raw? Finally, the healer turned to address the two Sheikah and Link. I've done everything I can. It's a miracle the boy made it as far as he did in this condition. But... She glanced back at Firenze, swallowing before adding, it's like he has lost the will to live. He's dying. Link closed his eyes, tilting his head to the floor.
Then,
Navi said, her voice shaking as though she were about to cry.
That must mean Arden is dead.
There has to be something we can do, Link said, clenching his fists and standing up so suddenly that Navi nearly fell off his shoulder. She took flight with no indignant remark, and her eyes settled on him as he began pacing. Firenze wouldn't be in this state if I hadn't let the great Deku Tree die. Navi looked horrified. Everyone else exchanged puzzled glances, except Rin and Sheik.
Link, we've been over this before. It wasn't your fault,
Navi replied softly. Don't tell me that! Link snapped back, causing everyone to stare. The healer glared at him reproachfully, clearly annoyed at his temper. Seeing this, Link let out a deep sigh, turned on his heel, and went storming out of the chapel. The sweet fragrance of incense inside the chapel had left him lightheaded, but as the crisp, winter air washed over him, Link felt no relief. His mind was a tempest of emotions, and he wanted desperately to take it out on something. He stomped over to a stone bench, kicking it sharply before he fell to his knees, completely oblivious to the pain welling up in his toe. He wanted to scream. Why had the goddesses let this happen? Why? In a moment of rage, and deciding that he wanted nothing more to do with the stupid sword, he ripped the Master Sword from its sheath and threw it with all the strength he could muster. It hit the rocks by the stream with a clang. He almost walked over to it and kicked it too for good measure. Forcing back a scream, he gripped his hair in frustration. The goddesses had chosen wrong. He wanted to scream that to the heavens, not caring if people thought he'd succumb to insanity. He didn't want this anymore. He just wanted to go home, to a place where Saria sat by his side, and Firenze wasn't fighting for his life. A place where the Kokiri were safe, and Castletown was filled with the babble of merchants and townsfolk, instead of the ceaseless moans of the re-dead. The goddesses had chosen wrong. He was supposed to save Hyrule, not destroy it. He hadn't saved anyone. All he could recall were the bodies of the slain, strewn about the streets of Hyrule's burning capital. You failed, Firenze. You failed all of them. That voice was in the back of his mind again, speaking with such clarity that it was as though someone was standing beside him, whispering in his ear. You were supposed to protect them. That's why the Great Deku Tree summoned you in the first place. Shut up! Link almost screamed aloud, smacking his fists into the stone bench with such force that he felt bones crack. His hand hurt, but he didn't care. It didn't matter. Not anymore. He didn't cry. Link doubted he had any more tears left to do that. Everything had gone wrong since he pulled the Master Sword from the pedestal.
Link?
Navi's soft voice beckoned to him. Link ignored her, wanting nothing more than to be alone. He definitely didn't want her attempts to comfort him right now. Go away, Navi, he said hoarsely. Please, just go away.
It's not too late.
Navi's voice was soft and gentle, but Link could still hear the edge of fear in it.
We can still save Firenze.
How? Link roared, his throat aching from the strain. Even when Navi seemed stunned into silence, alarm written across her face, he continued without remorse. How many times have I tried to save someone, and they've ended up dead anyway?
That's not true, she replied calmly.
Yes, it is! Stop trying to tell me it isn't! The silence that fell between them held for so long that it felt like there was a wall between them. At last, Navi spoke up.
You mean you're just going to give up and not even try?
She sounded disappointed and angry. Hearing Navi speak to him with such disappointment would have troubled Link under ordinary circumstances. Now, he just didn't care. Please, Navi, Link thought desperately. Just leave me alone. She didn't. She circled his head instead, wings buzzing in agitation. Navi spotted the sword lying abandoned by the side of the stream. Her eyes flickered between it and Link.
You have given up, haven't you?
Link did not respond. This time, her words stung, and he tried desperately to ignore them.
Well,
Navi said with an angry huff as she came to a halt in front of him.
That's selfish of you.
Her words were like a slap in the face. He heaved a sigh, trying to lower his voice. I've tried, Navi. It's all gone wrong.
Maybe it has, but you can't stop trying. Firenze is dying in there, Link, and you're sitting here moping. I thought he was your friend. He is my friend,
Link spat. He did not notice Sheik or Rin exiting the chapel, staring in concern at the fairy arguing with her companion.
Then help him, Navi yelled. Help him rather than wallow here in your own self-pity.
Self-pity? I just lost 7 years of my life and woke up to find Hyrule, the Kokiri, everything I've ever known gone. You don't know how that feels. The moment Navi gaped at him, eyes blinking furiously, Link knew he had gone too far. Without a word, she turned and flew towards the chapel. Sheik said something, but Navi ignored her as she zipped past. Navi, Link croaked, calming down a little as an icy sensation of shock crept into his stomach. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. What have I done? Navi halted halfway towards the door.
I know, Link, she said quietly. I know.
Her voice was filled with such hurt that it would have been kinder if she'd screamed at him. As she disappeared into the chapel, Link considered following her. Then he hesitated, not sure he could bear to look upon Firenze's broken body again. Not after what Navi had just said. Sheik's eyes were trailing from the Master Sword to him. You're not the only one who is suffering, Link, she said quietly. My entire family died the night Ganondorf sacked Castletown. We're all hurting. Everyone is suffering in this war. We can fix this. We can save Firenze, but you have to trust me. How? Link rasped, still shaking from his argument with Navi. The magic in the forest temple can heal him. The only one who can wield earth magic effectively, enough to do that, is the Sage of the Forest. First, we have to destroy the curse that is tainting the temple. Sheik explained calmly. I think I know what happened to Moriko. If my experience is any guess, once we break the curse in the temple, we may save her too. What do you mean? Link asked. There's a portal stone in the Lost Woods. It links to other worlds like ours. I thought the Kokiri might have been able to figure out how to use it and flee. Sadly, I was wrong. During my training as Rin's student, I visited one of those realms. I met a great fairy that had been cursed by a soul mask and lost her true form. I suspect Moriko's fate was similar. If so, she can help us once we break the curse, Sheik explained. Link was having trouble getting his head around the idea that there were other places like the Sacred Realm. Did you save her? The other great fairy? Yes, if all else fails, we can take Firenze to that realm and find the fairy, but that will take time, which is one thing Firenze does not have. I will take Firenze, Rin suggested. I dare say that a change of scenery would do you good. Sheik has had you cooped up in that inn for far too long. Not without good reason, Sheik objected. Yes, of course, Rin amended gently. I suggest you get ready. We may still have time to arrive and set up camp before nightfall. Link felt her eyes on him. As he reached the doorway of the chapel, Sheik stopped him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I think you're forgetting something. The Master Sword. He stared at the blade as it lay beside the stream. He'd wish he'd never laid eyes on it. He hated everything it represented. Him being the hero, the chosen of the goddesses, the one who brought about Hyrule's fall. Besides, a sword was only as strong as the courage of the one who wielded it, and he felt as though his courage had failed him. It had failed him from the moment he tripped over the body of a little girl as her home burned around him. Sheik didn't look like she was going to let him leave it there, and he didn't feel like arguing with her. Not now. I don't want it. I don't want any of this. He walked over to it and picked it up anyway. If it meant stopping Ganondorf, he'd take it. He could still make things right. Running his fingers along the cold hilt before sliding the blade back in its sheath, Link felt a flicker of determination rise in his chest. He could still make Ganondorf pay for what he'd done. No. He would make Ganondorf pay. Link sighed as he stepped through the chapel's doorway and into the dimly lit room. Navi sat by Firenze's side. She looked up as Link approached, her eyes red-rimmed. Navi, I'm sorry about what I said, Link said evenly, crouching down beside her in the pale form of Firenze. You're right. It was selfish of me. Navi offered him a faint smile.
It's all right, Link. I forgive you. We'll make things right. I know we will.
Link nodded, brushing Navi's face with a finger as he gazed down at Firenze. We will, he whispered. When Firenze's limp form had been saddled onto Rin's horse, Link mounted his horse and rode just in front of her, steering his horse in a straight line with far more success than he had several hours ago. After a short time, they left the deserted road and made their way into Faron Woods. Link glanced down at the bow hanging on the side of the horse with the rest of his luggage, admiring the polished Deku wood. Sheik had given it to him and helped him train while he'd been recovering from the poisoned arrow. He wondered if he'd be able to hunt in the woods tonight, or if Sheik would want him to explore the forest temple. He'd never explored it before. Only the elders ventured inside on rare occasions and never spoke of it. He tried to sneak in once, but Saria had found him and reprimanded him. It was too easy for him to get lost inside, especially without a fairy to help guide him. The thought of Saria made the pain in his chest tighten, and he glanced around for anything that might distract him. Navi's silence let him know she was still upset with him and wasn't eager to talk with either Rin or Sheik, so instead, he tried to focus on his environs. The sun hung at its zenith in a cloudless blue sky. Beneath it, the land begged for rain, but the heavens never answered. Glancing back at Firenze, Link watched the boy's labored breathing. He had been given fresh clothing, a white top with a green jerkin over the top, and black breeches. It made him look very odd, but at least he looked better and far more peaceful than he had before. After an hour of riding, they came to a grove. There was no undergrowth, though there may have been flowers at one stage. Now, there was nothing, and the bushes were just as bare as everything else in the forest. His attention was drawn to the stone dais at the grove's center. The stone itself was weathered and cracked, stunted weeds growing through the steps leading up to it. There were engravings along the edges of the steps, worn and faded beyond recognition. One engraving was visible amongst the tangle of dead leaves and twigs, a large emblem of the Triforce. It looked just like the dais in the Temple of Time. As I told you when we were at the inn, both this dais and the one in the Temple of Time are portals, Sheik said as she ascended the dais. Link followed her to the center, leading both his and Rin's horse, while Rin carried Firenze. You said it only works if I play a certain song? He asked, recalling the previous afternoon when Sheik had gone over her plans. That is correct, Sheik said. It's the same one I taught you, the Minuet of the Forest. She grabbed a harp from her saddle and plucked a few strings to make sure the instrument was in tune. Sheik seemed to always insist on doing this. Appearing satisfied, she plucked a soft, sweet melody. You know, Navi said, in a voice that said she was trying to break some of the tension in the air. You never mentioned what would happen if that harp was out of tune. Though he half imagined appearing somewhere that they hadn't planned on ending up, Link didn't smile.
It's not out of tune.
Sheik's voice was frosty.
Just wondering,
Navi said innocently. She seemed to realize nobody was amused and sighed as the tranquil notes of the Minuet of the Forest drifted through the air. A soft blue hue enveloped the dais. The horses whinnied nervously, but appeared to be more used to this method of travel than he was. Then, a wall of flames erupted along the rim of the dais. Strangely, the leaves scattered across the stone were left untouched. How long does this take to work? He asked, as Sheik stopped playing. A moment, Rin replied. Ready yourselves, we don't know what's on the other side. Link drew his sword. Sheik placed her harp back in its case, stowing it with the rest of her luggage before retrieving her bow and notching an arrow to it. Firenze was lying in the center of the dais, surrounded by both Link and the Sheikah. They hadn't left him on the horse. If the animal panicked when they arrived at the other side, he'd be in just as much danger on the animal as he was off of it. You may feel a slight discomfort, Rin warned him. What? Link asked, not sure he understood. Sheik hadn't mentioned anything about that. Then the world spun, and a wind howled past his ears. His stomach heaved in a moment of vertigo, and as the spinning subsided, Link lost his entire lunch onto the stone dais. Some discomfort? Rin's words seemed like an understatement. As he looked up, and before he could take in the bare-branched canopy that peered over the walls of the forest temple, a familiar laugh rang in his ears. He looked up, eyeing a leafless tree branch that stretched high over the dais. A figure stood upon the bough, a dark tube in one hand. A heartbeat later, the Skull Kid aimed his weapon at Link, sucked in a breath, and fired.